Oh, it looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining in. I see the numbers going up for people joining in, so we're just going to give everyone a quick minute to connect. Hello, everyone. Hi, hello. Wonderful. So as people start joining in, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to get settled down, grab a cup of coffee, a glass of water, whatever you need to get through this hour of content. Great. Okay, well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Oh, no, Wednesday. Thanks so much for being here with us today. Another great session planned for us. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with this second week of content. So today we'll be looking at AI, machine translation, evaluation methods, and also diving into a bit of a case study. So you might recognize the face on the screen today. I have the lovely Betty joining us. So Betty, I'll let you introduce yourself. I know a few people on the call already know you. Your reputation precedes you, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Betty Cohen, certified translator of member of the Ordre des traducteurs, terminologues et interprètes agréés du Québec. I have been for a long time and I still am actually a translator, English-French translator specialized in finance. But now I'm in another part of my career where I do more training, more consulting. So what I do now is I still train in financial translation, and I offer the services to LSPs for their employees, and I also teach at the OTAC itself. And I also offer now some advisory on how to implement, how to implement a new software, project management software or AI software. So that's what I do now, more or less. And I'm here with, presenting with Lucia.
Thank you so much, Betty. I think you were a bit modest there. You have such an amazing career, and the work that you do is just fantastic. So we're very lucky and very fortunate to have you join us today. A quick word about myself. Most people that were here last week heard this little introduction before. My name is Lucia. I'm part of the business development team here at Alexa. I will be your moderator for this session, as well as the entire course. So we'll spend, we now have 3 weeks left together as we explore AI and what it can do for translators. So we'll go ahead and get started. As last week, we encourage questions. We don't want this to be a monologue, so feel free to ask any questions. If you need more information, something is not clear, you want us to dive into another topic, don't be shy. There's a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, so you'll be able to write in your questions. We have lovely moderators here on the call that will be able to bring up those questions to our moderator, well, myself, or to Betty, our speaker for today. Last week, we had some amazing questions. We dove into some pretty controversial topics for the industry. So really excited to continue this with the group today. So a quick presentation outline. So what are we talking about today? First off, we'll get started with just a quick recap about last week's session. I know it was a week away, so we'll just make sure that everyone is up to par with the knowledge and that we can move on to the next portion of the course. Then we'll look at what are the benefits of machine translation for linguists. So we'll dive into a few of those, and then we'll look at different methods of evaluation as well as their limitations. We'll then finish things off with the best use for machine translation, and we'll top it off with a case study, which Betty is very familiar with. So really looking for your insight there, Betty. We left a bit of time at the end for Q&A, but again, if you have any questions throughout the session, just don't be shy. Use the Q&A section of your Zoom screen to communicate with us. So a quick recap from last week. We went through quite a bit of a technical session. We dove into some of the theory behind machine translation. The session was hosted by Jason, my colleague who has more than 10 years of experience in the field, a true expert in this subject matter. So we looked at the different types of machine translation, starting our journey all the way back in 1949. So a bit of a history lesson there. If you're a history buff, I hope you appreciated it. Then we looked at what it takes to train a machine in machine translation, and what makes a technology through a true AI versus a solution that is based only on machine learning. And we finished things off by offering just a few thought-provoking questions when selecting a machine translation solution for you. So it was meant more as a way to explore, if you're shopping for a solution right now, what should you be looking for? What things that should stay top of mind? Great. So this is our cue to get started on new content. So this is a bit obvious, but worth noting. So what are the benefits of machine translation for linguists? Obviously, it does a bit of the heavy lifting, but especially in times of crisis when the timeline is incredibly tight for a project. So the main reason linguists or people in our industry turn to machine translation is when they have an urgent project in time of crisis, when the timeline again is very tight, and communicating is of the utmost important in a timely manner. This can be a great help for that. So think of some projects like Amber Alerts for missing children or a missing person. If you have a stock, if you have, for example, a trade halt on a stock, on the stock market, that's something that could be quite urgent, and every second counts. So we're able to rely on technology, and people in our industry do rely on this technology to be able to meet those new standards of deadlines. I'm sure given the audience that you have, you can think of at least a few projects that were urgent and where technology was useful in meeting a client's deadline. So another benefit to highlight is that machine translation, when done right, is translator-centric, and so it focuses on being an extension or part of the translator's ecosystem, rather than being like a replacement or something that is meant to be in lieu of a translator. So again, we talked about this in the first session, but good machine translation will keep the translator in the driving seat and make sure that there is some sort of feedback loop, and it's not just a straight line in terms of the process. So what do we mean by that? And I'll just dive into the next portion here. So when there is no translator in the loop, where it's truly input text, machine translation, and then you get it output result, it's really a straight line across. So there is no interaction from the translator. There's no translator feedback. There's no way for the translator to interact with the technology. This is what Jason alluded to in our last session, and this is the portion that is that is dangerous, and where a machine is not able to truly impact the work that translators do on a day-to-day. We found that the best results are where the technology is translator-centric. So you would see a scenario where you have some input text, it goes through machine translation, then there's an output result, and there's a way to capture that translator feedback. And so this is where true great machine translation lives, and it's the recipe for success. Think about it as the best chocolate chip cookie recipe in the world. This is truly what will get you the best result.
No, that is, if I may, Lucia.
Yes, please go ahead, Betty.
That is a very important point to strike, because machine translation is a tool. A tool is only as good as its quality or how you use it. So it is very important to prepare the software first. So if when you integrate a machine translation, an automatic translation tool in your process, you probably already have translation memories. So the first thing to do is really to feed the software with what you already have, because you have been through that, you have revised it, you know it's good. So it's your own production, so you trust it, of course, more than anything else. Second thing is to continue cleaning, to continue correcting the output of the machine, to continue feeding the machine, so that the more you go, the better result you get. But of course, again, you are never safe. I mean, 100% safe. So you really have to have somebody looking at the machine output always, because in the end, the text is your responsibility, it's not the machine. So the machine doesn't have any responsibility. You, as a user of the machine, are responsible. And that is a point that has to be really, we have to insist on it, because you cannot blame the machine for an error. It's always a translator. So it's really important to really, when you implement a machine translation software, to provide for a process, a very organized process, to feed the machine, to correct that, to give it feedback, so that you keep on improving the result. And we had, if I may also, we had a question last week about pre-editing. And the person was saying, I'm interested to hear whether post-editing of MT can be truly effective without any pre-editing. Yes, it can. Because now, with the quality we get now, and the intelligence, the artificial intelligence software, etc., we can do that without pre-editing. Pre-editing, it kind of, to me, it's kind of a thing of the past, because of the improvement we have now. And the rest of the question was, is there a market for pre-editing? Never heard of it. So just to answer the question, if the person who asked it is still here. But in any way, if you have a very efficient post-editing process, pre-editing should not be an issue.
Thanks, Betty. This is a great insight. Maybe for the benefit of the group, and for some people that are not familiar, can you define what pre-editing is?
Yeah, pre-editing is actually preparing the source text, actually simplify the language of the source text so that it can be processed by the machine.
Okay, interesting.
To me, it's a great danger, actually, because what is this? Like, you impoverish the language, and you get a poor language in the machine, and you get a poor language out. So, yeah. In the long run, I don't think it is something that is any good to humanity or society in the long run. I don't think so. But this is what is pre-editing. It's like preparing the text. We talked about it a lot in the first, the first years of when machine translation
Yeah.
started, etc., because to make it easier for the machine to understand. But I mean, to me, if I have to do the work before I do the work, what's the point and what's the advantage?
It's
So
like I'd like to say it's like washing dishes before you put them in the dishwasher. It's the same.
But again, just to stress it again, post-editing is very important. And post-editing, some people do not call it post-editing, and I don't call it post-editing. I call it revision.
Yeah.
Because it is really revising a translation. Whether it's done by the machine or whether it's done by a human translator, you're still revising it. I mean, the process is exactly the same. The only difference is sometimes the machine is going to make mistakes that are not natural. And that's where you have to be very careful. But if you're a good reviser, you can do a good job and have a good result.
That's a great thing to highlight, Betty. And I think what is important is how far we've come along in this technology. I think sometimes we forget as we try to be very picky with the results that we get, and we tend to want perfection. We forget how much miles have been walked since the initial launch of the technology. If I may, Betty, there's a question here in the chat from someone. So Manon would like to know, do you not find that machine translation encourages translators to become lazy about syntax? For example, leaving English syntax instead of rewording in proper French.
I think they've been lazy before the machine. Sorry to say, but I have seen some. No, I don't think so, because of course you will always have somebody who's lazy, but you could have before a translator who would just like do a little translation without asking themselves if they can do better. So if the machine gives that, if the grammar is correct, well, this is what it is. The translator is not very good, or it doesn't have the time. Sometimes it just don't have the time. You have to take that into account too. And again, it depends also on the text itself, on the objective of the text. That's right. Some text you have to work and rework. Some no. They don't. If the text has a 2 hours lifespan, what's the use? So that's where AI comes in and you can do something. But no, what I've seen is that a good translator who really uses the software as a tool and is very, very conscious of their responsibility, they will not, it's their name that's going to be on this translation, not the machine's name, if ever it has one. Hope not. But you see what I mean? So yes, it can, in theory, yes, it can. But if the translator is a good one, is professional, I don't think it will make any difference.
That's you're getting a lot of responses here in the chat, Betty. So a lot of people agreeing with you, some even saying, it's absolutely right. It totally depends on the quality of the source text. Ekaterina here just also mentioning that, it always seems strange to her that we call work post-editing. Even in some technical text, it might be, but in most texts, it really is a revision, whether it comes from a machine or another translator.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And I think you made a great point, and it will tie in nicely with how we evaluate quality in translation, and really what are the goalposts for quality in a translation. So that's something that we can dive a bit deeper in together. Also, a question from Joel here in the chat. I will propose it to you, Betty. I'm not sure that I know the answer to this. Is there a machine translation that attains 100% accuracy? I don't believe that it's on the market right now, and it will take us many years to get there. So I think the best I've seen just hover between the 90% accuracy mark. Yeah.
No, no, I don't think so.
But also, and maybe this is a controversial question, Betty, but can we say that even a translator can attain 100% accuracy?
Hopefully. But again, depends on the conditions, you know. You talked about my experience. I was for 15 years head of the translation services at PwC Canada, and we translated a lot of financial statements for prospectuses. When you have a week to do 80 pages, you know, error is human. So there you go. And that's why you have to have several layers of quality control to make sure that you minimize this as much, and you get 100% text at the end, because you know, we had 2 levels of quality control all the time because of that.
Interesting.
Because of that, because of the risks, because we were working too fast.
So I guess what we can offer to the group is it depends on the constraints and what is the purpose of your message, as well as the audience that you're looking to reach, right?
Exactly.
So those are some things to consider as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. So we'll keep on keeping on. We'll start looking at some of the benefits of machine translation for linguists. So Betty, you highlighted a few of these, and as we started talking about this topic, we kind of inadvertently talked about this. But one of the benefits of machine translation is to offer consistency. And I know you have an opinion on that as well. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. But with the machine and with true AI technology, you can depend on your platform, on your technology, to offer consistency in terminology. So for example, when we train Alexa, we account for specific terminology, whether it's lexicons, term bases, even things like translation memories. We account for all of that, and we build it or bake it into the system to make sure that we can help translators maintain a consistency of language. Betty, I'll let you dive into it a bit more.
Well, the secret to have consistency, because if you let a automatic translation software just translate like that, you have a risk of having 2 different terms, or the same term in English translated in, you know, different ways in French. But that can be solved very easily if you create, first again, translation memories, and you create a TM per client, so that you can, of course, when you have a new text for this client, and your TM of course has to be, I mean, super clean. That's where it's difficult. I know, I lived through that. It's very difficult for LSPs, and when you're in the heat of the work, etc., to keep a translation memory clean. But that's really the nut. You have to keep your translation memory clean, so that whenever you have a new text from a client, you are sure of the terminology, you are sure of the translation. You go through it first through your translation memory, and completed by the automatic translation software. That is the optimum, I think, to me. If you can do that, then you can have, and you continue feeding your machine, you continue feeding your translation memory, to continue giving, correcting whatever, revising whatever is there. That's where you might come finally to a result that will be close to 90%, 80, 85, 90% accuracy and consistency, etc. But everything, we were talking about pre-editing. It's not pre-editing. I think the preparation, the terminology, the preparation is that how you feed your machine is important. So to me, that's where the important point is.
And that's great. And to highlight it even further, Betty, I think what we're getting at is it's not so much about the technology, the raw technology that you have. It's more around the methodology and the systems that you put in place.
Exactly.
Great. No, that's a great takeaway for the audience today, for sure. So when we talk about evaluating machine translation, we have different ways of evaluating the machine translation and even the translation in general. Definition or some of the goalposts that are set by the industry are summarized. So I'll just go ahead and read this for everyone. So good translation entails accurately communicating the meaning from one language, so your source text, to another language, the target text. It must convey the original tone, intent of a message while taking into account cultural and regional differences. So there are many definitions on what is an accurate translation, but this is the one that we'll use for our presentation today. So keeping that in mind, there are quite a few ways to evaluate the accuracy or the quality of a translation. One that is being used specifically for machine translation is the Blue score. So the Blue score is a metric. So it's a formula that does not account for human opinion or input. You also have things like the H. Lepore score, which is a bit of a better metric because it accounts for more of the quality factors, but these are completely formula based, if you will. So some of the pros and some of the cons of these methods. So they're very fast and easy. It can be calculated automatically with a formula. It's kind of widely accepted in the industry. So it's something that as an industry, we decided to use as a benchmark for evaluating machine translation. It's also very good for comparing similar tools, so different machine translation systems. Again, some of the cons, so it doesn't indicate what is wrong in a translation. So it's not able to label exactly what piece of the segment or the translation is lacking. And it doesn't correlate well with human evaluation. So something could have a very high Blue score, but then when a linguist reviews it, they say, oh, this is not great translation, or I completely disagree with the score. Betty, you and I talked about this recently. I believe it was a Slater article around the evaluation of quality and what are the limitations of purely mechanical or automated evaluations.
No, the research on that has been going on and on and on.
Yeah,
and I've been reading about it and saying why. But anyway, they finally came to the conclusion that any automatic correction system or evaluation system does not equate the human intervention, human correction of the text, human revision of the text. So that was in a Slater article a few months ago, and I must say my reaction was like, duh. I mean, we all know that as professional translators, we know it. But of course, that the industry looks for, means to automate everything is natural. It's fair enough. But for now, I think translation is too sensitive, too touchy. Depends, again, it depends on the text, it depends on what you're doing. But I still think that at least one quality control by a human being, flesh and blood, is should be there, should be provided, should be done.
And I think that's a great point as we look into some of these methodologies and standards that we can use. We're trying to quantify the process of quality, but like you said, there is still a human element that is critical in assessing that. That's for sure. So a few other methods that we have developed as the industry standard. Again, these are completely automated. We have the DQF, so the dynamic quality framework, as well as the modified DQF, so the DQF MQM. So these are other methods that you might have seen as you evolve in this industry, or if you've ever worked with machine translation and machine translation results. So again, a few other pros and cons further to what Betty was saying. So it includes over 33 metrics. So it captures a wide net of data. And it does dive into what and why are we evaluating this this translation. Again, some of the cons, so some of the things that you alluded to, Betty, are listed here, but generally, I think something that is worth highlighting is that it requires someone to be dedicated to maintain this this system on a full-time basis.
Definitely.
So when we look at when to use machine translation, where could it be useful, where does it lack a little bit, we'll look at some of the use cases scenario. And I know, Betty, you had something happen this week, so I look forward to hearing that.
That's on the next slide.
Okay, perfect. So when does the machine translation truly shine, and where can it be helpful? So repetitive text. So if you have text like earning results, product descriptions, anything that is highly repetitive will work very well with machine translation. Again, we talked about this in the beginning of the presentation. So anything with a large volume of words. So think of, for example, transcripts of trials where you have to keep, for example, a client of a law firm in touch with all the trial proceedings, and you have a massive amount of data that you need to translate very, very quickly with a fast turnaround. And then also projects with specific terminology. So again, if you look at, for example, COVID daily updates, crisis communication. So when you have something that's highly specific to a type of project, then machine translation can be really useful in these types of scenarios. And with like any other technologies, there are scenarios when it's not able to help, or it's not the best suited solution. So think about, for example, creative projects. So if you're working on something that's highly creative, something that requires like a short 1 or 2 liners that are very, very creative. So if you have campaign slogans, if you have things that are of that nature. Also text with ambiguity. So if you have double entendres, if you have, for example, the speech of a CEO that is toned with nuances and different meanings, that's something that the machine might not be able to capture as well. You can get there eventually, but it will take time. And Betty, I'll let you share your story.
That's where my example comes in, Lucia. Because I mean, it came up yesterday morning and I said, oh, this is nice. So I had this sentence in a text that I was translating. I read it to you, and it says, this is about providing our people with meaningful work, meaningful connections, and meaningful rewards so that they can achieve meaningful growth. In this example, first, meaningful is difficult to translate because there's not a word directly, it's not directly translatable into French, right? Because of the context. That's what, for one. And there you have at least 3 different meanings of meaningful. So what do you do with that? And the machine will probably give you significatif 4 times, which is not the right word, and it's not, you see what I mean? So that's where, and it could look, I mean, the machine output could look good, but it's not that. I mean, I cannot give you the context here, but it wouldn't be significative for sure for me. translator who are listening to us. But this is exactly the type of sentences that cannot be treated well by a machine. It really, really needs a human looking at it and doing whatever it takes. And we had a question last week about keeping translators connected to a hugely satisfying part of the profession, creating great text. This was a challenge. It took me half an hour to get out of this sentence yesterday morning, but this is where it is, and we don't lose it, because that kind of text with nuances and ambiguities and things like that are not yet easily translatable by a machine.
And thank you so much for sharing that example, Betty. And like you said, I remember this question from the group, and it's something that a lot of translators struggle with, saying, with the path of technology and how it's advancing and evolving, kind of where do I fit in, or how do I make sure that I can still do the parts that I truly enjoy about my job? And I think that the example that you highlighted a few seconds ago is just exactly that, an example of how you can still be connected to the part of your job that you like. You can still experience the wordsmithing of a text. You can still use your training and make sure that you're connected to that portion of the work, for sure. That's great. I'll take this opportunity to ask you a question from the group. So Lena wanted to know if machine translation would be helpful for research sites where market news are time sensitive and need to be communicated fairly quickly before they become obsolete.
Yes, so this is the perfect example where you can have machine translation, because of course you're going to translate that in a second, and then you take a few minutes to do a quality control, and there it goes. So that is a perfect example of a good use of machine translation, that's for sure.
I think that's great that Alina asked the question. And when I think of translators now, I think of them as artists, and they have to choose what is the best pencil, or what is the best brush in their arsenal to create the canvas that they're working on. And sometimes it is machine translation, and sometimes it's not. And so that's a great point there. Great. So we're speeding along through this content. And again, please don't be shy if you have any questions for Betty, for the group, anything that you want us to maybe dive a bit deeper into, or if you have any burning questions about machine translation, just don't be shy. That's what we're here for. So we'll start looking at a case study that Betty knows really well. So we wanted to include this in this session because we wanted to put at the forefront what you can do with machine translation, and how, when it is integrated well into a team, what types of results can you get. So this is a case study from 2 years ago now, where there was 3 main problems within a department in a large accounting firm. They had increasing client demands and very tight turnaround times for translation. They had, similar to the rest of us in the industry, less resources and less external translators availability. They also had strict deadline constraints. So think about filing dates, for example, that cannot be moved. So what was the solution for this team? So they decided to implement an AI solution. They also decided to build a dedicated neural machine. They uploaded a large amount of proprietary technology, so with translation memories, with term bases, and it ties in beautifully, Betty, to what you were saying before, as well as training the users, making sure that everyone in the team is comfortable with the technology, having dedicated resource and support allocated to the team. and having continuous improvements, whether it was regular training or feedback meetings, just making sure that, if you remember a couple of slides back, making sure that the loop was continuously followed in the feedback here. So what types of results they experienced? So they were able to reduce by 30 to 40% the translation time, so the turnaround time for a project. They had improved productivity for the translation team, and the dedicated neural machine was learning over time. So over time, they were also seeing that they were getting better and better results with this dedicated machine. Betty, you're the expert on this, so I'll turn to you to share a bit of your experience and some of your feedback from this.
Yes, actually, yes, this is what happened, and the results again depends on how you prepare your machines. If they could reach that 30 or 40%, it's because the input in the machine was very well prepared. All the translation memories were clean, etc., etc. And now the translators use the translation memory and use the AI for, to get propositions of translations, and then they can correct them as they see fit. But this did not prevent any revision or any, the 2 levels of quality control are still there, because it is very sensitive material and error is not an option. So very, very important to prepare. And also, I must say that this is for very repetitive text that comes back. Each cycle, it's financial statements, they come back, and they're almost the same from one time to another. Funds and RFPs. That's the tricky part, because the commentary in the fund is not always suitable for machine translation, or it has to be really revised after that. But still, the rest of it is very easily processed with translation memories and machine translation. So there you are. But it was a good acquisition, and I think it's still working well. I don't have news anymore, but yes.
No, that's great insight, Betty. One question from Judy here in the Q&A section is for this particular case study, what she's saying, it's an enormous amount of work for an organization to take on. So what kind of roles had to be created internally to allow for the success of this?
In this particular case, we did not create a role, but we gave tasks to people, because the financial industry has cycles. So you have really downtimes. You have downtowns between quarters. So between the quarters, and after each cycle, we would have people going back to the text, going back, cleaning all the translation memories, cleaning all the, feeding the machine with new feedback, etc. So it's a kind of a new role, but it was given to the same persons. It's new tasks, that's for sure. But the thing, again, I cannot stress it enough. The thing is having a clean, clean data in the machine.
Yeah.
If your data is not clean, you're not getting the right results.
You're preaching to the converted here, Betty, but you're absolutely right. So what I'm hearing, Betty, from your experience is it wasn't so much about the new roles, but rather optimizing these people and the process to achieve this success.
Mind you, it could be a new role in. I know Judy, and it could be a new role in an LSP. Office, because you don't have those downtimes that I'm talking about. If you don't have downtimes, you don't have time to do it. So you still have, you have to hire somebody who will do only that, or at least, spread the task over many people. but I totally, I know how difficult it is, because those are roles that are not, bringing you money directly when you're an LSP. So that's difficult. But still, they can, in the long run, they could be very valuable. So you really have to think about it.
For sure, Betty, thank you so much for that intervention. Around implementation and around the process of onboarding, especially with a machine translation tool or platform, we do have our CEO. So I know Gary's on the line, and he spends a lot of time with our clients and people in the industry thinking about this and how to optimize the process. So Gary, I'll just turn to you to see if there's any commentary you can offer around this. And there's a couple of questions that I think would be great for you to answer.
Lucia always likes to pick on me at the end of the presentations, she keeps me for last because she's like, the real value is Betty, and then we'll pick on Gary for small things.
Long time no see, Gary. How are you?
It is always great to be in such good company. So it is including such a great audience. So a couple of things that I would share along the same lines of what Betty was suggesting. A lot, I cannot tell you how many times we were in discussions with potential clients where they just say, oh, how does your technology compare to versus other technologies, etc. And very rarely do people ask, what support you provide? How do you help us train? How do you help train us? How do you keep making sure that we are using the tool fully? And this doesn't matter what technology it is. It's not exclusive to AI machine translation. This is CAT tools. This is translation management software. And I'm not going to pick on Betty, but I'm sure Betty has dealt with CAT tools in the past that may be pretty well spread out there, but with very poor support, where if you want to see any change affected within that tool, it would be very hard to get and sort of sometimes fall in deaf ears. And you could see this amongst a variety of technologies. And the real value and something that you should ask for is, how would you support our team as we actually implement your tool? What does that look like? And to Judy's point, if there is a big project where it's a lot for the current teams, what can this potential external partner do to help you? And like, what does that look like hands-on? And the reason why that's important is that adoption curve is really split up, that in the early days, you're not going to have an uptake automatically from everyone within the team. And this is when CAT tools came in initially, there were a few people that enjoyed technology and implemented it. The rest of the people said, this is going to take away our jobs. CAT tools are a threat to all of us. And here we are 25 years later, and CAT tools are just a tool, just like everything else. But what made a difference, though, was in the early days is that those early adopters helped train others and sort of say, hey, look, this did make my life easier. In this context, it did help. And that's really something that has to be really well thought out. And I think the entire community here should put pressures on all the technology providers to say, how can you help us? How can you help our team, whether it's an internal translation department or an LSP, to help us adopt this effectively versus here's the tool, here's a bunch of licenses, you figure it out. Because that's a lot of pressure on you because you've only had your scenario versus companies that are in this space all the time have seen all kinds of scenarios that they can help share with you.
That's great, Gary. Thank you so much. It ties in also very nicely to another question from Judy, asking around the best practices for companies that start to use MT. So to distill your commentary and maybe 2 or 3 key points. So it truly is about who your partner is in this process. Also asking the right questions. So making sure that you do have that right support, that there is a structure in place, but also further to Betty's point. So having clean data, making sure that you have a process to maintain that data, and that you are able to continue with this over time and to maintain it over time. A question from Katharina here in the chat, and I will open it up to any of the speakers on the panel. What would you say to translators who insist that you can make a living as a translator by doing MTPE, so machine translation post-editing?
It's possible. Doesn't pay much though. Sorry to be so blunt, but this is what it is. I don't think, I mean, of course, again, when I say it doesn't pay much, it depends on yourself and how, you know, how much you charge, and if you can get work from you know, enough work to be busy all day. Of course, it can be, I mean, it's perfectly possible. But to me, that is revision. It's not post-editing anymore. It's revision.
That's
and, you know, revisers have existed for a long time, and they have been making a living out of their job, and I don't see why it shouldn't be possible. Again, it's another type of revision because of, I was saying, you know, sometimes the mistakes of the machine are really weird or very tricky, but when you learn about it and you're really, you know, wary of it, why not?
Lucia, if I may, what I would say to Katharina is that when translators say, I can't do this, I would say, give it a shot, you know, try it over some time, try with different texts, because to Betty's point, it doesn't work for everything as well as it does for others. And to the extent that you don't want to touch machine at all, then revision, to Betty's point, is actually an excellent, because the reviser's job doesn't change when you're comparing line by line. Once you have the final product. So being a reviser, you would not do much machine translation other than you'd want the machine to have your final edit so it can learn for future purposes, so it can benefit the translators. As a reviser, you don't have to do machine translation in the traditional sense. The translator would provide that to you, and they would have presumably done some post-editing.
That's great. Thank you for your interventions. And Katharina is saying, you know, she totally agrees, and she is a very positive person that believes in the benefits of this methodology as well. So we're almost running out of time, so I'll just carry over with the presentations, but don't be shy if you have any other questions, anything that you want us to get to before the end of the presentation. So in conclusion, machine translation can be a great tool with fantastic benefits, but as we talked about during this presentation, it really comes down to how you integrate it in your day-to-day and to which project and what that process looks like. And for it to be successful and to get the better results, we always recommend to keep the translators in the driving seat. So it is truly imperative to keep the translator in that position, as we saw, to make sure that the feedback loop is continuous and that we can capture all of that, so the translator stays at the heart of the process.
If I may, do I have time for one last point, Lucia? Just to go back to Gary's previous point.
Yes, please go ahead, Betty.
When you're launching a new tool, start small. Don't try to do everything at the same time. You know, start with a certain type, one client or one type of text, and then grow on it. I think this is the best way to get buy-in from all the teams, because you have, as Gary was saying, you know, resistance to change is really, it's a real thing. But start small. I would say start small and progress.
Thanks, Betty, and it ties in very well into our next session and who our next speaker would be. So if there aren't any more questions from the group, I'm just going to give you a quick teaser about what's coming up next week. So next week, we'll take a closer look at ways to successfully implement AI translations for translation departments or LSPs. We'll have the pleasure of having Kate Kreiderman join us. So Kate is a translator. She was part of the onboarding of a automated translation translation tool as part of their day-to-day process in her team. So be sure to tune in for that next week. She has a lot of great wisdom and knowledge to share. So before we disconnect for today, I will pass it on to Gary. I know he had a few closing remarks for this session. So Gary, on to you.
Well, and I want Betty to jump in. So this is very much just a couple of additional points that tied into this. And the first one, really to Betty's point around start small, start with certain components, and even a pilot group within your team that can be that proof of concept to really show that how something works. It's always easier with a smaller group to actually dive into the details versus you do presentations with 40, 50 people on the call, and then it's a lot easier to lose people into it. And this is with your own teams, right? So if you had a handful of people being part of that, especially key people within subgroups within your organization, it's a lot easier to get that buy-in, because you can handle questions, you can actually handle a lot of the pushback that can come up. You can also get mentors within the organizations or externally. I mean, mentors are a good idea regardless, whether it's technology, whether it is best practices within your day-to-day work. But within this, if you were implementing machine translation 5 years ago, you may have been innovative. You may have been sort of ahead of the curve. At this point, the curve is here. So now there's a lot of people that are actually that are working with machine translations. There's a lot of people you can learn from, and a lot of people that you can say, how were some of the things that were actually implemented? Like, what were the challenges you went through? What did you learn from it that actually is critical? Lucia runs a group, it's called L'Equipe AI, where it's specifically heads of translation departments that talk about these challenges for that very reason, because no one was born knowing it all, and we can all learn from each other's experiences. And part of the reason why having people here like Betty or Kate next week sharing some of these learnings is that when colleagues or counterparts at other organizations have gone through this, they can share sort of their learning curve in a way that is much more palatable and much more broken down to a way that it can be consumed within your organizations. And I'm only pausing because Betty may have
No, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. You have to have, you have to organize your implementation. That's for sure, and you have to make it really to plan it well, and make sure you have the buy-in of your people. That's for sure. So starting small and growing on it. I will always remember when I first installed a project management software. I had this lady who was, resistant. She invented resistance to change. And she was like, I never work, blah, blah, blah. 1 year later, we had a downtime in the system, and we had a problem, we had a bug, whatever. She rushed in my office. How am I going to do? We don't have the tool. I said, oh, that's nice. There you go. So, it takes time, and you can gain the most resistant people if you really, really work slowly with them and show them the benefits of the tool. And having people, having mentors and people helping who know, having somebody around who knows how it works and who did it before. Sometimes it can help, having some advice, and that can go a long way too.
Any technology you're implementing, if there's one thing you take away from sort of questions to ask vendors from today, is what is your implementation plan? How are you going to help us implement this effectively? Any technology, put that pressure on the technology providers, because they should do their homework and put together the learnings they have from various clients to put it together in such a way that makes it easy for you. Having good technology is only half the battle. Without really helping you implement it effectively, making your life easier that way, they're not doing their job fully. So this, no matter and this is well beyond just translation technology. Any technology you're implementing, you should always ask that question. And if if you can see all the steps and sort of think within the context of your organization, saying, I can see how I can get to the end result doing this, then you should seriously consider that tool. Otherwise, you should be resistant, because if all the onus is on you to figure out the implementation, that's a lot to add to your day-to-day, because all of you have day jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Thank you so much, Gary and Betty, for joining us today. You are putting Kate on a silver platter to look at this and dive into the issue next week. So thanks again to our participants. Really appreciate you spending the hour with us. I hope you got some great nuggets out of this presentation. As always, if you need to contact us or if you need more information, feel free to reach out. If not, we will see you next week for our third session of the course. Have a beautiful day, and thanks again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Betty.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gary.